Hey, welcome back to the Difference Maker Revolution mindset, I was going to say, because that's what we're all talking about today. So the Difference Maker Revolution, because we're talking about the power of positive mindset. And what we're going to make sure we don't talk about in this is politics. We are not talking about politics because politics is not positive. All right. So, Jeanine, you are a really positive person, right? You're always bright and breezy and take the world on and nothing can stop me. So what for you drives that positive mindset? What's the key thing that every day, Jeanine, you open up, get out of bed and say, I'm going to achieve what I've set out to do today?
Coffee.
Any particular brand that we should take?
Oh, Lord Almighty. Now it's interesting, Ronan. I think, I don't know if there's a specific key. It's always been the way I've been. And it's interesting because I think a lot of it comes from my parents. You all have met my mother, so it will surprise you to know this. But, and I love my mother dearly. Sorry if she actually listens to this podcast. That's going to sound really bad. No, so she always has been amazing at reframing something that could be seen as negative to something positive. I'll give you a great example. You guys know I have scoliosis, and I grew up with scoliosis, and I had to wear a back brace from the time I was 7 until I had surgery when I was 13. So a lot of kids would be like, oh, this sucks. It's 100 degrees out. I have to wear a back brace. People are going to make fun of me, blah, 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 blah. All the negative things that can go with that. My mom was always very positive and would flip things around. Jeanine, look at the benefit. You don't have to do physical education. You don't have to do PE, or Jeanine, look at the benefit. You can do this. Or look at, someone will carry your bags for you, Jeanine. You don't have to carry your backpack. She would always find the silly little things. You get to have the locker closest to your room. She would find the silly things that would help me look at the positive on what was normally a pretty crappy situation for a kid to have to wear a back brace. And so even like the hours in the day I didn't have to wear it, we would always do something extra fun and extra exciting so I could look forward to the break that I would have. And so I think it really started there, and I love my mother for that reason, even though she thinks that, Ireland has a queen, or I guess now a king. But she was always does, even still now. And so it's interesting sometimes, so when my father passed away and she had a hard time coming out of her sadness, it was very strange to me because my mother has always been a very positive person and I got my positivity from her and always had to reframe things. So it was really hard for me to help her on the flip side get through that because I've never seen my mom sad. And in fact, it's funny when, if I have an off day, I'll get that from my friends. Like, whoa, Jeanine, you can't, what's going on? You can't be we need you to be bright and cheery. You can't have a bad day, And so, it's interesting. I don't know. So it's something inside. I always want to look at why, to me, there's no point in dwelling in the sadness or the non-positive because it's just a better day if you can look at the bright side of things. And there's always something bright and cheery to look forward to. We're in the middle of chaos right now in the studio and we're always finding the bright and the cheery. And because I've built, I've been able to strengthen some alliances with the chaos that we have. And so, there's always something bright to look at. You could choose to look at always the negative, or you can choose. It's a choice. You can choose to look at the positive.
And I think it's important to, people talk about positive thinking all the time. They're like, that's a lot of BS and horse crap. But it's rooted in science because I just Googled it here, right? In terms of, I had to Google I couldn't remember the name of the phenomenon, right? So, when you are looking to buy a new car and you weren't aware of the make of that car, and then suddenly you see that car everywhere. So that phenomenon, which I couldn't remember the name of, is actually called the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. And basically what happens is your brain is subconsciously looking for the car. And as a result, because your brain is subconsciously looking for the car, you start to consciously become aware and notice more of the cars. They were always there. You just weren't aware of them. So when it comes to positivity, if you have a problem, right, you have a problem, right? Something negative has happened and you focus on all the negative aspects of that thing happening, subconsciously you're focusing on the negative, you're going to find more negative. So that's why I borrowed George Lucas's quote that Qui-Gon Jinn said in episode 1. He said, "Remember, Anakin, always remember your focus determines your reality." And I added to that quote and I said, focus on the positive, be aware of the negative, but never entertain it. So if we have a problem that we want to solve, we can't focus on the problem. We got to focus on solutions to solving that problem. And when we focus on that, subconsciously, we're training our brain to focus on the positive outcome that we want so that we start to problem solve and find solutions to those problems.
It's interesting you say that, Jonathan, because sometimes another thing that I will do is I will give myself a time limit. So like, let's say like I did have a little self-pity party for myself with this mold issue, but I gave myself a time limit on it. And I was like, okay, that's it. 20 minutes. I'm going to have my fist pumping and yell at the world, and then I'm done and I'm going to go solve a solution. And actually it's kind of cathartic sometimes to let yourself have that, like 15 minutes of, but then it's done and I'm done and I'm going back at trying to find the solution, but not ignore, like you said, you don't ignore the problem. The problem is there. I can't just pixie dust it away. It has to be solved and I have to go about a solution. But you acknowledge it, but then you got to go solve it.
And one more comment, because everyone else is being quiet. So I will say that I think attitude so your attitude and your work ethic is so heavily linked to having a positive mindset, because it's so funny. It's like one of my heroes growing up was Roger Federer. If you don't know him, he's probably one of the greatest tennis players ever. And Federer was known for being completely effortless on the tennis court. He made tennis look so easy. Like his footwork, he floated around the court. He looked like he was a ballet dancer in a tennis court, and he just had effortless power. And he recently said in an interview, he's retired a couple of years back, and he said that when all the journalists and fans used to say, "Oh my God, I love how effortless you are," he said he used to find that insulting, because he said he worked his absolute butt off every single time in the tennis court. And he said he couldn't understand why journalists were saying, "Oh, if you only tried a bit harder." And he's like, I am trying. I'm trying my absolute hardest every time. I'm working harder than every single person out here. So, I think having the attitude and the work ethic is linked to that positive attitude, because you have to want it and you have to put in the work coupled with that. And that it's not about, like, the end result was he looked effortless.
It's interesting. I think too, Ronan, it's a bit of momentum. And when things are going well, it's easier to stay positive because you have that positive momentum going with you. Where the challenge is when things go bad, and how do you get out of the quicksand and the sliding down and drag yourself back out into.
So what role does having a purpose and knowing your why play on positive mindset, if any?
It's huge, because once you know your purpose, then you align things to lead you to the direction of achieving that purpose and to surpassing that purpose. When Jeanine was talking before about when things go bad and get yourself things start spiraling, and how do you turn yourself around? Well, that's when you need to have that positive focus, because what you resist persists. And I see it all the time in lots of people where their focus is that spiral, avoiding the spiral, but you can't not think about what you're not supposed to think about without thinking about it. So the more you think about avoiding that spiral and getting out of it, then the more you are focused on it, and the more that is, more you are spiraling down. Whereas when you have your purpose and you work towards that, that spiral becomes a bump on the road, something that, is not going to shift your focus, away from where you want to go. It's just a bump in the road that is a temporary thing, and it's part of the journey. It's part of learning.
I think it gives you a reference point for why you do what you do.
So Brad, you know that book that we read a couple of years ago? I can't remember the name, but you'll remember the name. You're always very good at that. You know, the monkey brain one?
Say that just because he was scratching his head at the time?
That was very appropriate for those of you watching on YouTube.
it's here. It's this one.
Yeah.
So, Path to the Jungle. Yeah, do you remember this one? And I remember reading this about, because I'd read stuff before on how the brain is constructed and all that and everything else. But one of the things he talks about in it is the monkey brain, he calls it, where, it reacts just to, fight or flight, and it's that reaction. And he's talking about the whole thing of, when there's a moment, like, let your monkey brain have its moment, count to 10, but let it explode inside or do whatever, and then let the human brain click in, or the proper brain. So it was interesting that was a big moment for me, because I used to be very, even still, when I click badly, I have a really, really, really bad temper. Really, really bad. And
Who would have thought?
One of the things that helped me was the realization as to why, that it's not that there's something wrong with me, it's the way I'm actually wired, right? And one of the things that has helped me massively with a positive mindset is meditation. Do any of you guys do any meditation? Transcendental meditation? No? Okay, because Susan says to me, she's what, we're married 33 years this year. We know each other 38 years. And she can tell a day I don't meditate.
We all can, don't worry.
You can get, Roni, you can get a, I don't know the name of the device, I'll have to figure it out. You get a device, you just attach it to your finger. I suppose it's like a blood pressure thing. It'll tell you how much, I'm going to get this all wrong, but essentially tells you how much adrenaline or cortisol you've got going through your bloodstream at any one time. And generally, adult males have anywhere between 20 to 40, 20 to 50 is a healthy range. I score in the 70s, daily. So it'd be really interesting to see where to put that on and have meditation. Because when I put mine on and I meditate, my stress levels through actual active meditation and breathing drops in the teens. So it drops into healthy ranges. So it'd be interesting because you'd actually have some data to back that up on. And it happens as well when you wake up because your body gets a big cortisol rush, adrenaline rush when we wake. So it's sometimes why when we wake up we can be a bit, anxious, nervous, more aware of our surroundings because we've just been pumped through with cortisol to actually wake us. But there you go. You can test it. You can monitor it, Ronan. But monitor it before meditation, monitor it during, monitor it after, and then have a control week where you're just like some absolute ape, and it'll be great.
Can we not have meetings during that week?
I want meetings.
It'll be on a week when he's on holiday.
Should we sign a waiver during that week?
The office gets bad with Jonathan.
No, but seriously, that has really helped me have a positive mindset. The two things for me is purpose, knowing my why, and the meditation has been a big help. Positive mindset.
I don't know where you get the getting up as, when you're stressed. I'm still in a coma, for half an hour after I get up.
First thing I do, I wait. The alarm goes off, or typically, as we all do, we wake up 2 minutes before the alarm goes off. That can happen to you guys, yeah? So you wake up, you turn the alarm off, I have a glass of water, I drop the water, and I'm straight into meditation.
I'm pressing the coffee machine button.
I'm right there with you, Steve. Nothing before coffee. Of course, I still have an 8-year-old that would prevent any fun miracle morning routine for me.
Well, my monkey brain tried to hijack my meditation at one stage.
Hijack it?
Yeah, it did. It tried to persuade me that you don't need to do this. something I learned about positivity, right? And I can't remember who the guru was, because it was recently enough that I learned it. And I used to, like, if I missed a day doing something, I'd nearly give up on it. Do you know that sort of way? I've broken the pattern. Now it's gone. And he has this saying of never twice in a row. So it's okay to miss something one day in a row, but never twice. That's interesting, because at one stage when I did stop the meditation and I went for a few days, it was nearly like, I've given it up. My monkey brain was saying, you don't need to do this. You've given up. You're a failure. You haven't been consistent. Typical you. And then when I learned that, I went, like, if I do miss a day on it, I haven't missed 2 days in a row since then. I haven't missed 2 days in a row.
So bringing it back to just relevance for photographers, right? Because we're not saying that bad things don't happen. Bad things do happen. It's how we react to those bad things happening that defines us. So, like, for example, you could have a day or a week where you make 100 calls that week. So I'm going to scare everyone now. Make 5 calls that week and nobody answers the phone, right? And how you choose to react is a choice. You can say, oh, nobody picks up the phone. I can't make any bookings. The leads I'm generating are terrible leads. They don't value what I do. That's a choice, that internal dialogue. Or you can ask yourself the question, okay, I made this many calls. Nobody answered. I don't have any bookings. What can I do better to start making bookings? And then you're switching the focus of your brain onto what you want, making more bookings. You're focusing on solutions. You're not focusing on the bad thing that has happened. It's just flipping the narrative. Jeanine, do you find that happens to you?
Yes, and no. So we'll have bad things happen. If you want to continue on with the bookings example, we'll have days, of course, we'll make 20, 30 phone calls, not 5, 20 or 30 phone calls, 20 or 30 phone calls, and nobody picks up, or 5 people pick up, and we still don't book any of those 5. Now, usually there's a lesson to be learned in it, right? And so we're always trying to look for the lesson, like, what did we do wrong? We always look internally first. We never blame outside. So, what did we approach the phones from a non-positive mindset today? Or was it just a bad day? Sometimes you just chalk it up. And so and I've had to do this with my team. I've had to do this recently because we've had a couple of days in a row where we didn't have any bookings. And I actually had to just stop. You know what? Today we're not making any phone calls. We're going to go do something different. We're going to do something creative. We're going to do something fun, and just stop and just pattern interrupt and do something different today. And so we did something a little bit more creative as a team, and then went back to the phones the next day. And it's amazing what happens when you do that. And it kind of stops that spiral that I was talking about earlier. And if you don't have that inward ability to stop the spiral on your own, you have to pattern interrupt and do something to get you out of that. And it could be anything. Getting out of the studio often helps. A change of scenery, a change of pace. I think, is it in the 12-week year where they talk about run and then rest? Where you run, is in the 12-week year? It's in one of the books where you run at a really fast pace, but then you have to rest. Because you need that change of pace in your head. And it's the same thing. If you have a few days in a row where things aren't going according to plan, pattern interrupt yourself and do something different. And then it helps if you have a hard time shifting your focus back to the positive. I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
So I have a question. It does make sense. So is it possible to run a successful business and be a pessimist?
Only if you hire optimists around you.
And hope you don't scare them away with your pessimism. It's hard for optimists to be around pessimists. It's really hard. It's hard to always be the person that brings people up. It kind of sucks your energy. And I have found in team environments, sometimes the lowest common denominator sucks everybody down, as opposed to somebody bringing people up.
Is that the bad apple?
So, that's a good question, Ronan. That's a good question. I don't know. Steve has seen more.
They have a lot more power, the people that bring people down.
Yeah.
It takes a lot more energy to bring people up than to take people down. And I've seen it in bookings, like what you were saying, Jeanine. I worked with a studio, and they were just not getting bookings for nearly a month. And the language was all about nobody picks up, nobody's answering the phone, nobody returns my phone calls. And it was a month. And it took, I don't know, I went down there and then gave them, and I suppose this answers to your question, I gave them a new goal, because they were focused on getting through the leads, and they were already seeing nobody pick up the phone. And when they were leaving messages, they were leaving messages as if nobody would ever listen to them, and they were talking to a machine, not the person. And it was incredible. That day they made 4 bookings. They hadn't made any for nearly a month, and that shift in focus on rather than getting through the leads to making bookings, and approaching it with a more positive attitude, it just changed everything. And so I think we made 20 bookings that week by the end of the week. So that power of shifting the purpose of the calls into having fun, making somebody's day, made a difference.
I'll give a good real life example if you want one, Jono, that maybe people can relate to. I remember when Erin was in middle school, she had a really bad week one week. Like, just everything was going wrong with her friends, with things at school. And as Erin is a little bit on the introverted side, so she doesn't verbalize like some of her struggles, but you can see it. And I remember one day I knew she didn't want to go to school, but as a parent, you got to go to school. And I sent her to school, and I was driving away, and I was like, you know what? She doesn't need to go to school today. She needs to change her mindset. So I drove back to school. I checked her out, and I took her to Busch Gardens. I was like, we need an adrenaline rush. You need a change of pace. You need to get out of this environment. And we went and rode roller coasters for a day and just had fun. Had that adrenaline rush through her veins, and then she was able to go back to school the next day with a completely different attitude because she had a break from that week. And so sometimes it's hard for, I think, people to relate in their business, but if you can look at it like real life, like examples in your life like that, you can see how sometimes when you make those choices to do that, and it is the same thing in business. And I think sometimes it's easier as a parent to make that choice because it's 6th grade. What's the worst is going to happen when she misses a day of school? Whereas in a business, you're like, oh my gosh, if we're not on the, like, oh my gosh, if we don't do all the things we're supposed to do today, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. But in actuality, sometimes you do just have to change what you're doing that day and in order to make better.
Nothing ever changes if nothing ever changes, Jeanine.
That is true. Definition of insanity, right, Steve?
Yeah. But again, you're pattern interrupting.
Yeah.
You're changing that pattern. And I think people just get used to that pattern, that routine, and they just run that pattern again. And so what you're doing is creating a pattern interrupt for her so then she can be a different person. And that's great.
I got a thought for you, Ronan.
Yes, Brad.
Do you think you're actually a pessimist in disguise? and you just think you're an optimist?
I'm a pessimist in disguise, but I'm really an optimist. I
was just Googling, your question intrigued me. I was Googling some studies, and it's mixed. There's studies that show optimists perform better as entrepreneurs, and there's a lot of studies that show pessimists perform better as entrepreneurs. One of the I suppose correlating things between the studies that all said pessimists did well is that pessimists have an innate ability to be able to set realistic expectations. They like going through numbers, and when they forecast their business, they forecast realistic expectations, whereas optimists tend to over exaggerate their ability and what their business can do, and then they'll never hit that, and then they will feel disappointment, and then tend to actually give up. Whereas pessimists, the study that was conducted in the UK actually earned more money and ran more successful businesses. And that's a trait that I know you had. So that's why I asked if you're just a pessimist in disguise, because you do very realistic forecasts.
One of the interesting things, I was doing the same thing as you there, is that they were saying that, for Steve Jobs, he had to learn when to be an optimist, a pessimist, and a realist. And he had to adapt his outlook, how he viewed things based on the situation. So you have examples, like you said, like Elon Musk is like the ultimate optimist. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
It's interesting. Did the TV show Modern Family ever make it across the pond?
Yeah, I've seen Modern Family.
So there was an episode, and actually it makes me cry every time because it's the exact thing that you just talked about, Brad. And so now it makes me actually question about Ronan. But it was a whole episode about dreamers versus realists. And the dad and the one son, they were dreamers, right? They always dreamed they could do the next best thing, or they always dreamed they could build this kite that could fly. I don't know, they always dreamed. And then the wife and the other child, they're the realists. They're always telling me, you can't do this. You can't do this. That's not real. And so the whole episode was all the conflict between the dreamers and the realists. And then at the end, it was like this whole, sappy montage about how we can't go anywhere without the dreamers because they bring us to where we didn't think we could go. But the dreamers need the realists to kind of have the strength so they don't float away. And it was very interesting. It was such a good episode because it talks about how the dreamers and the realists need each other. And so it's interesting. It makes me wonder, it's
about
Ronan
what you
both.
just said is, and with a positive mindset, there's no such thing as a pessimist. There's only optimists and realists. I love that.
No pessimists. So maybe your monkey brain is the realist, and your woo-woo
Your woo-woo.
Meditation brain is the optimist.
It's a great question, Brad. I like the...
Well, yeah, I mean, even what you just said there, Ronan, because ultimately it's... in my opinion, that pessimists can run successful businesses based on my belief in just the greyness of life. It is I'm not very black or white. If I ever draw a line, I draw a real line, hard line in the sand. But ultimately, I think we all exist somewhere in between in this grey sludge.
Great.
And I think there is room for pessimism in success. Otherwise, I think it'd be quite silly of us to dismiss it, because I think pessimism ultimately is the reason why we have what we call realists. Because realists are just pessimistic opinions that you've logicked out essentially. It's in the middle. It's bang in the middle. You've got optimism over here and pessimism over here, and you have this huge pessimistic opinion, and eventually logic it out, and you come back to your middle ground. You come back to the grey. You go between the white and the black.
That's you're assuming that all pessimists are white and all optimists are black, or vice versa. Like there's a scale. It's not just your either or.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. It's a scale. That's my point entirely. It's all a scale. And it's based on individual decision, not overall. You might be incredibly optimistic about, I don't know, England winning the Euros, but incredibly pessimistic, about your chances of being able to run a marathon. It exists. It exists in flux.
And that's what links back to your why and your purpose for me. That if you make your business about your why and your purpose and being a difference maker, that you will be more positive in your business, and therefore, as Steve teaches us all, people borrow your confidence. You will naturally be more confident. So keep your pessimism if you want to be a pessimist. I'm not going to entertain that thought. I'm happy with realism, but not pessimism. So keep your your realism. The realistic thing here, guys, is, as Jeanine just said a little bit earlier, the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over and over again. The future for you as a photographer is to become a difference maker. That's where your future success is. That's where your happiness is. That's where your positivity is. So click on the link below, join the inner circle, be the positive impact that you will be on your clients every single day. Make a difference. This is the Difference Maker Revolution. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.